Joining me from Chicago is Obama campaign senior advisor David Axelrod. David, thanks for being here. Let me start with you.
Good to be here, Candy.
And ask you, if I am sitting in my living room watching this and I am worried about my job and I'm worried if I'm going to be able to pay my mortgage, I'm worried if my kids are going to be able to have a good life, would you make the link to me between those fears and when Mitt Romney left Bain Capital?
Well, absolutely, because when you think about what's happening to our economy and what we have to do to move forward, one of the big questions is questions like outsourcing. And is outsourcing a good policy for this country? Governor Romney's firms were involved in outsourcing. He bought firms while he was there whose principal mission was to provide outsourcing services to other companies. This informs your decision. Perhaps that's why he supports tax cuts for companies that move jobs overseas. We lose $100 billion a year to offshore tax shelters. We've learned from the limited disclosure that he's made that Governor Romney takes advantage of these. He had a Swiss bank account. He has a Bermuda holding company.
Can I just ask you,
tens
David,
of millions of dollars in the Cayman Islands. So when we reform the tax code, when we go to reform the tax code, Candy, how does that inform his judgment? He's told us that his business experience is the lens through which he's going to look at these decisions. Well, we're getting a look at that experience, and people need to judge, is that the kind of experience we want in the Oval Office?
Can you tell me, when you do your taxes, don't you use every available way to pay as little as you can?
I can tell you that I've never had a Swiss bank account. I've never put money in the Cayman Islands. Well, I don't have a Bermuda holding company. No one is suggesting, Candy, I'm not suggesting that, based on what we know, that he's done anything illegal. I'm not suggesting that. But what I am suggesting is that he's taken advantage of every single conceivable tax shelter and loophole that we can see, and now is he the guy who's going to clean up our tax code and make it advantageous to average taxpayers and the country, or is he going to look at it through the lens of his own experience?
Well,
and by the way, on the subject
use every means he can to pay as little taxes as he can?
Well, I'm sure he could have a Swiss bank account if he wanted it. He could have a Bermuda holding company. He could put tens of millions of dollars in the Caymans. He could use loopholes in the tax law to have a $100 million IRA, as Governor Romney does. The president could do those things, but he doesn't do those things. He looks at this through a different lens. But we don't even know the scope of it, Candy, because, as Ed said again today, and Governor Romney said Friday, they won't release any more tax returns. His father, George Romney, said if you release 1 year, it could be a fluke. It could just be for show. So he released 12 years of tax returns. We don't know what he was doing back in those Bain years with his taxes. We don't know all the loopholes he might have taken advantage of, and I can only conclude that they think, with all these Republicans asking him to release these returns, that whatever in those returns would be more damaging to his campaign than simply not releasing them.
And why would people not buy into the theory from Republicans that you all would rather talk about Swiss bank accounts and about why unemployment is still over 8%, why the housing market has yet to recover, why the middle class has lost a lot of wealth, why this is so focused on Bain Capital and Mitt Romney's tax returns?
I invite you to go out and travel with the president. Every single speech he makes is about how we rebuild this economy, and most specifically how we rebuild the middle class. And there are fundamental differences between him and Governor Romney on policy about whether tax cuts for millionaires are worth more than paying down our deficit, educating our kids, and doing other things we need to grow the economy. That's what the president is talking about. Governor Romney is the one who's run a campaign that is predicated on the negative. I'm not Barack Obama, therefore elect me. And I'm a businessman, so I know how to fix the economy. Well, if that's the experience he's running on, then of course that experience is going to be scrutinized.
Let me read for you a couple things. John King wrote an article Friday quoting two Democratic members of Bain Capital who said the following: Mitt Romney left Bain Capital in February 1999 to run the Olympics and has had absolutely no involvement with the management or investment activities of the firm or with any of its portfolio companies since the day of his departure. That's from the main managing director. And another employee said he was just gone, meaning Romney, and it happened very suddenly. After that, he was not on calls or writing memos. he was gone. At what point will you be ready to accept, if ever, that Mitt Romney, may have been on a lot of filings listed as the owner, but he had no day-to-day management, and therefore when you talk about outsourcing, he was not there when those decisions were made?
Well, it's interesting, Candy, because he's very willing to take credit for everything good that he thinks happened after that point that Bain Capital was involved in, but he's not willing to take responsibility for this. If their story is that he was the chairman, president, chief executive, and sole shareholder of the company and took no interest in any of the decisions they made, then they can make that case. We know that the Boston Globe, the AP, Bloomberg News have all done reporting in the last few days that have called these assertions into question. But there too, I mean, they could release the board. They could release their board minutes from that time and other records that would show exactly what his involvement was. We do know that he said he had no involvement with any of the entities that Bain was involved in, and yet he came back for board meetings meetings of a couple of those entities. But the larger point, Candy, is he was in charge when they bought these firms whose principal mission was to facilitate outsourcing and offshoring. What he's saying is, well, I left before they actually moved these jobs to China and to Mexico, and I'm not going to be held responsible for it. Harry Truman had a plaque on his desk saying the buck stops here. If Mitt Romney became president, he'd have a placard on his desk saying the buck stops there. If you're the head man, you have to take responsibility, and he's going to have to explain that to the American people.
Let me ask you, your deputy campaign manager, Stephanie Cutter, said this week that the SEC documents show that Mitt Romney is either a felon or he's lying to the American people. Do you think it's possible Mitt Romney is a felon?
Actually, that's not what she said, Candy, and I was listening to the call when she spoke. She said if he was, in fact, not the chief executive, the president, the sole shareholder and chairman of the company at the time, and that's what was filed, that would be a felony. She didn't say he's a felon.
No, I'm asking you.
That's entirely different. But the point is that the point is that he was the person of record in charge of the company, the sole owner and shareholder of the company. Now, it may be that he's misleading people now when he says, I had nothing to do with it. So I'm willing to give him the benefit of the doubt and say those documents were accurate, and what he's telling the people, the American people now, is not. I'll give him that, but neither is a recommendation to be president of the United States.
Let me ask you a final question here, David. The president remains under 50% approval, which isn't a great place, as you know, for an incumbent. This race has not changed in months, despite the fact that both sides in the Obama campaign particularly has been just pouring money into these negative ads. Some 60% of your ads have been negative. Your fundraising is lagging behind Romney's. Why?
Well, let me just correct one thing you said, Candy. 90% of the ads that have been run by Romney and his allies since March have been negative and aimed at the president. So I think it's a mistake to say that our advertising has somehow been more negative than
I just said that yours has been 60%
Their whole campaign is predicated on it.
I just said your campaign has been 60% negative, according to CMAG.
Yeah. But, I think that our fundraising is largely grassroots oriented. Our average donation is $50 a donation. Governor Romney's done very well at the top end, and he should, because he's promised another $5 trillion tax cut skewed to the wealthy, another $250 million, $250,000 tax cut for the wealthy that would add to our deficits and compound our problems. So, that has some appeal to some folks, I'm sure, but we're going to we are going to persevere here. We understand we're going to be outspent. Their super PACs are spending untold sums of money against us, most of it undisclosed, like much of the Romney campaign, and we'll have to persevere and fight our way through.
I think somehow you'll manage. I just have a feeling. But thank you so much, David Axelrod, Senior Advisor to the Obama campaign. I appreciate it.